The green flag is waved. All eyes to the lights. They're poised and ready to race.
Hello and welcome to Keeping Track F1 Academy Edition on Traffic Paradise Radio. I'm your host Niamh, and joining me is Uno.
Hello!
So, Uno, what is it that you know about F1 Academy so far?
I know about Amna Al-Kubaisi. She's my favorite driver because she drives for Visa Cash App RB. So I know all about her and I love her, but I don't know much else about Formula One Academy. I have watched the races, but there's a lot more that I need to know, I think. So I'm very excited for this episode today because I think I'm going to learn a lot.
I'll just run you through the basics really quickly. So obviously F1 Academy is an all-female series. It's about equivalent to an F4 series. It's a couple of steps below F1, but the main difference between other F4 series and the F1 Academy series is that it's a modified car. So the rear wing of the car is different for an F1 Academy car compared to the other F4 cars, which makes it different to drive. So even the girls that are doing F4 series as well, on top of F1 Academy, such as Abby Pulling, they don't necessarily have an advantage over everyone else. They are managing two different cars, just like anyone else would be doing. F1 Academy is unique in that it has an age cap. Every single series of single-seater racing has a minimum age. So like some F4 series are 14, 15, I think F2 is 17, but F1 Academy is unique in that the oldest you can be is 25. That's to help get young talent through so that the 16, 17-year-olds aren't competing against your drivers that would be about the F1 age. It helps get the 16, 17-year-olds into seats and hopefully into F1 in the future. Making sense so far?
Yeah, and then can they be there from like the age of 16 to the age of 25 or?
No. F1 Academy also has a maximum of 2 seasons. So you could compete in one season, skip a year and come back to F1 Academy, or you could do 2 consecutive years, but you cannot do more than 2 seasons. So that will be affecting, I think it's 9 people on the current grid. They're all on their second season even. So come the end of this season, they will have to find a drive elsewhere.
Oh, okay. So does that include Amna?
Yes, it is.
Oh no.
Unfortunately. So it is Amna and her sister Hamda, their teammate Emily De Hoyce, all 3 of the girls who drive for Rodin, Abby, Lola, and Jessica Edgar are all out of a drive at the end of the season. They'll have to go elsewhere. And so are Bianca Bustamante and Carrie Schreiner. The other 6 girls are fine. They could do another season or they could go elsewhere and come back. But yeah, it'll be a very reduced grid next year in terms of people who we're familiar with.
But that's pretty interesting because it gives everyone a nice chance to have a turn, to have a go at it. Because as you say, it's a lower tier series. It's not like F2 or F3. So there's still room and space for these drivers to go to other series and upgrade to a better series, I suppose. So this is more like a bottom tier formula, I suppose, is the right word to use.
Yeah, F1 Academy is probably one of the first steps that a driver would go to. So they'll go from karting to either an F4 series or F1 Academy. Then the step up from that would be Formula Regional, which is where last year's champion, Marta Garcia, has ended up, and where Dorian Pan is also contesting. She's doing 2 series in 1 year, which absolutely insane. Good for her. And then you have from your Formula Regionals, you'd go up to F3, F2, and then ideally you'd be going up to F1. But everyone knows it doesn't always work like that.
Yeah. The F4 Saudi Arabian Championship. That is like a Formula 4 regional series.
Yes, it is on the same level as like British F4, F4 UAE, and Italian F4. So F4 series tend to be country specific. So British F4, but then your Formula Regionals tend to be Formula Regional Europe, Formula Regional Asia, etc., etc. So it's more like national versus continental.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. Because I know Amna's done like Formula Regional European Championship and Formula 4 in the UAE and in Saudi Arabia. So I'm just trying to sort of figure out how that fits into everything. But that makes sense. Cool. Now I understand.
Yeah, a lot of the girls have experience in various F4 series. As of right now, I think Hamda has the most experience in separate series because she's done F4 Saudi, F4 UAE, and she also became the first female driver to score a podium in Italian F4, which obviously is a pretty big deal because Italian F4 is like the top of the top for that level.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, there's lots of other drivers who've done things like that because Abby Pulling, she has won a British F4 race. That's another pretty big F4 series. Nerea Marti's done Spanish F4, which again, highly, highly competitive. I'm just in awe of these girls. They're amazing. But then you also have some of the girls have done sports car racing because Abby Pulling has done Ginettas, which is a form of sports cars that Lando Norris first started in when he came out of karting. Jamie Chadwick as well. Obviously, she's a really big deal in single seater racing over in the US. Lots of really, really good drivers have gone karting, Ginettas, single seaters, and had amazing careers. So here's hoping she can follow that. But then there's also Carrie Schreiner and Dorian Pan. Both of them have done endurance racing. Dorian has done the World Endurance Championships, the European Le Mans Series. She is really, really good at her sports cars. She's insane when it comes to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I remembered Dorian Pan doing Le Mans this year, didn't she?
She was supposed to, but unfortunately she had a broken rib, so she had to pull out last minute. So the Iron Dames had to replace her with one of their other drivers. It was very unfortunate when it happened because it was supposed to be her last sports car slash endurance race before she focused on her single seater career, and she didn't actually get to do that. So I was a bit gutted for her, but oh well. I'm sure she'll be fine.
It looks like she's got a very good future ahead of her, so I don't think she's missing out on too much.
Yeah. You said that you'd watched some of the races. Which races specifically did you watch? And do you have anything that you'd like to talk about from them?
So I've watched all of the races this year. I wasn't able to watch last year's races, and I don't even know if they were all broadcast last year.
They weren't broadcast live last year because there was issues with rights and stuff due to obviously the F1 name, but
Mm.
they are all on YouTube. At least the highlights are on the F1 Academy YouTube because that's how I first got into racing. I started getting these videos of women racing cars.
Oh, cool! So we can go back and watch the last season's races as well, at least the highlights clips.
Yep,
Cool, that's pretty cool.
I think they have almost all of their races. I think they're maybe missing one or two, but that's nothing in the long run. They had 21 races last year, so it'd be quite a bit of effort to get them all edited and uploaded. So,
Yeah, I think the race that I remember the most was Miami. I remember Miami
mhm.
being quite a big race this year. Obviously, I've already spoken about how much I like Amna, so I remember she did very well at Miami, and she also got that special Visa Cash App livery in those Miami colors, which was awesome. For me, what I've really been picking up on this season is that sort of integration of these drivers from F1 Academy with the Formula One teams. So I know 10 drivers on the grid are affiliated with a specific Formula One team. So, for example, Amna is with Visa Cash App, her sister is with Red Bull, Dorian Pan is with Mercedes, for example.
Mhm.
And what I found very interesting, because I follow all of those Formula One teams on Twitter, when there's an F1 Academy race on the same weekend, I like to compare what those teams are tweeting about during the weekend. And a team like Visa Cash App RB generally are quite good when it comes to promoting the Formula One Academy race, the F1 Academy races. And
Mhm.
other teams are maybe not as good at it. And other teams don't go to those same lengths. Like even Ferrari had their special livery. They didn't give one to, is it Meyerwerf or Werch. I don't know how you say her surname.
Yeah, it was Maya. She didn't get the livery, but she did get the race suit. Because I remember her being on the podium in blue and it looking very weird.
So she got half of it. Okay, she
Yeah.
got the blue pajamas.
Yeah, she got the blue pajamas. Lucky her. Going back to what you were saying about some teams promoting it better than others, one team that I've noticed that seems to be really, really good at promoting it is Haas. They only have one junior. That junior is Chloe Chambers. And when it was the Barcelona weekend, they were posting about her quite a lot, which obviously was really good because she won a race that weekend. And it was like a really dominant lead. I think it was like 7 seconds or something over Abby Pulling in P2. Since then, they've posted about her a lot more. But then I think I want to say Alpine maybe just like mention that Abby's racing and they'll put out a couple photos and that'll be it. Whereas Haas was like, well done, Chloe. Here's this for Chloe. Here's Chloe at a separate race weekend altogether. And it was just like, oh, that's interesting.
I think some F1 teams treat it as like a chore that needs to be done, get ticked off the list of, okay, we've done this, now back onto our main race. Whereas other teams really sort of have embraced this idea of sponsoring a driver in the series. Because was it Red Bull brought Hamda to the Goodwood Festival of Speed to drive her F1 Academy car up the hill with the other Red Bull cars, which I thought was really special.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty special as well. But Williams did the same thing with Leah Block. I'm signed up to the Williams app, so I get emails every so often, just like saying, "Oh, look at this thing we've done. Look at this thing we've done." And there was a while after Goodwood where every single email I had, it was like, "Come watch Leah driving." I think it was the FW08 up Goodwood, and it was just like various onboards and videos of her going past. And I was like, it's so good that they're obviously promoting their drivers. Obviously, they'll want to. They can in turn make money off of it, push their drivers up, have an F1 driver. But I just thought that most drivers at an F4 level don't get that kind of publicity.
No, absolutely.
It's sort of like, oh, we have this driver. Here's the results once a month. They're doing okay. Whereas these girls are getting shouted about, and it's like, it's really good for them because it should help them find sponsorship.
Yeah, because ultimately that's what this is all about, is about getting the recognition and the experience to go up to a more senior level and compete at a higher level with men in
Yeah.
racing series, in a series that is dominated by men, that they would be able to actually go and face them head on and like challenge them for wins and podiums and stuff, which is important.
Yeah, that was an issue that the previous all-female series, W series, had, where there wasn't really anywhere for the drivers to go. There was 3 seasons.
Mm.
All 3 seasons were won by Jamie Chadwick. Jamie Chadwick is now doing amazing over in, I think it's Indie NXT, but there was just nowhere that she could really go from W series. It was an F3 level series, but the car was modified. So she would have had to go F3, F2, etc. And it was the same with Abby Pulling. I think it was the end of 2021, I want to say. She was supposed to go up to F3, but there was a funding issue, so she couldn't. And then she just had to stay back another year, and then she hasn't really gotten the opportunities and stuff. It would be great to see some of these girls move up to like a higher level. Personally, I think that Abby Pulling, Dorian Pan, and Maya Vogue should go to F3 next year just because of the level of experience they have. But I also think that a lot of the other girls, so like Aurelia, Jessica Edgar, Hamda, and Amna, I think they should go to Formula Regional Series just so they can get more experience before making that jump.
Maybe this is the right time to ask this question. Do you see a viable path for these women to get to the ultimate goal, which I'm sure is Formula One? Is there a viable path now because of this series for them to get into a team, even if it's a lower team at first, like a Sauber or a Haas or a Williams? I'm not expecting anyone to be signed straight away to Red Bull or Mercedes, but is there a chance now, a path for these women to get to Formula One?
I think yes, but I think it's more theoretically possible than it is practically possible right now, because obviously Marta Garcia, she went to Formula Regional. That's good. But say Dorian Pan manages to win the title this year. She's already had a year of Formula Regional. So does she take the free Formula Regional seat, or does she make the jump up to F3? It's things like that which would be a problem. But then also you have the issue of teams not necessarily wanting a female driver because, oh, she's only proved herself in an all-female series. She can't race against men. Why would we ever do that? That's ridiculous. But then at the same time, you can kind of see where they're coming from. If it's a smaller grid, then you have to take it with a pinch of salt, obviously. But FRECA a couple of years ago, so Formula Regional European, it had the option for every single team to have a fourth seat for any female driver. I think that was how Maya Vogue first got into Formula Regional. She was one of the fourth seat drivers. And it was just an incentive to try and help get women up. And obviously, these initiatives to try and help female drivers is really good, but some of them need work. Some of them are a good idea in theory, but in practice they just don't work as much.
I know, for example, Amna Al-Kubaisi, she has won races in Formula 4 UAE Championship. And
Mhm.
yeah, she's also won races in F1 Academy last year, but I'm more focused on that Formula 4 UAE Championship. So it's not like these women are being lapped when they go to these other series. Like they definitely are capable of doing just as well as the men there. So
Yeah,
I think it's maybe very short-sighted of these teams to not consider them, because really they've got all the same talents and skills, and now with this series the experience as well to go head to head with these guys and challenge for podiums, for wins, for points, for fastest laps, for poles, so if it was me and it was my team, I'd say, yeah, give them a shot. The worst that can happen is that they don't do well and you replace them the next season. There's so many men who go into motorsport who don't do well.
yeah.
It seems odd to me that you would automatically ignore these women for positions in your team when you probably have on your history books countless men who weren't very good at the racing that they did and had to leave
Yeah.
after a season or two.
There's someone who made his F2 debut without having scored a single point across any of the other junior series he'd done. Like, I think he was in Formula Regional, Formula 4, and then he went and did like some of the Indy feeder series, and he hadn't scored a single point. But he was able to make his debut in F2. And I saw a lot of jokes that, oh, they should have put Dorian Pan in that seat, they should have put Abby Pulling there. And I was like, they'd actually probably be more competent. It's a vastly different car. I believe they could adapt pretty quickly, but
Mm,
obviously, funding issues and stuff means that it's harder for female drivers to move up as they don't get those sponsorship opportunities, and
yeah.
people feel worse about sponsoring them. And then sometimes those sponsorships come with strings, because there was a W Series driver, Emma Kimmelen, Kimmelainen. I don't know how to pronounce her surname
Mhm.
at all, but she was in talks for an Indie NXT seat in, I think this was back in 2010 or something, and she very nearly took it,
Mhm.
and it was all good. It was a great thing for her, except one of the team sponsors wanted her on the condition that she would, I think it was pose shirtless for them, and it was just like, oh my god, that's just not appropriate at all. So she didn't end up getting the seat. Obviously, fair enough to her. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that. If this is the things that people are saying to women that are doing well in motorsport, because she's still an absolutely amazing racer. I think she has a couple of kids now, and she's still out there racing. She achieved pole position in some sort of rally, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and it's just like, imagine what she could have done in single seaters had people just given her the funding.
I'm kind of shocked actually. I'm like I'm so shocked by that story. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Can you imagine, like, I was gonna say Lewis Hamilton, but I think he likes taking his shirt off, so I'm not
George
gonna
Russell Core.
mention him. But yeah, but just like stipulating in a F1 driver's contract that they got to have X amount of topless photos done in order to get the car. Like that is ridiculous. You would never do that,
Yeah.
ever, 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 ever. It's crazy. I'm kind of when you told me that I had that is it Charlotte Tilbury, the
Yeah.
lady who was so shocked when she saw the crash on camera, and there was that meme going
Yeah.
around of
She
her
was
like jaw dropping, like, oh my gosh, what has just happened? That was what my jaw looked like in that moment. I might just edit that in.
yeah, that's something I love about Charlotte Tilbury is that she has come to most of the races. I want to say she was in Jeddah and Miami and maybe Barcelona. I could just be making all that up, but she was there. She was supporting her driver, Lola Lovenfoss, which is obviously the F1 teams are doing that. They have people there. It's all good and kind and stuff. But what about the other drivers who are not seeing as much? I think Tommy Hilfiger came to Barcelona to support Nerea Marti, and that's obviously good and well and stuff. But the other girls who aren't getting those people coming, Jessica Edgar, she's sponsored by American Express. There's nothing for her to do really. There's no one coming. I think her family goes to some of her races, but she's not getting the same level of support as some of the other girls are getting, as some of the people in junior academies are getting. And it's just a bit meh.
Maybe you can explain to me what's the deal with those other 5 teams, because 10 of the teams or 10 of the drivers. Okay, so I understand there's like a team of 3 drivers, but then each driver has a different sort of title sponsor.
Yeah.
So there's the 10 Formula 1 team sponsors, and then there's 5 other teams, and then sometimes like a 6th other car as
Yeah.
well.
So, like you said, there's 5 teams, 3 drivers per team. And of those 15 drivers, 15 full-time drivers, 10 of them are sponsored by F1 teams. That was done, so obviously you've got a driver in a junior academy, they're more likely to move up through the ranks because they have money, they've got backing, they've got whatever else it is that junior series teams are looking for. They can also get experience because some of them can
Yeah.
test F1 cars and stuff. They can do all sorts of things like that. But then for the other 5 drivers, they all have individual sponsors. So I think it is American Express, Charlotte Tilbury, Tommy Hilfiger, Red Bull Ford, not Red Bull Racing, and Puma.
Okay. Yeah. Puma, yeah.
Yeah, so all 5 of them support a driver. And that's also just to help with the funding side of things. But then the other car that you mentioned, how there's sometimes 6th, is a wild card. Each location, they will try and get a driver to from that area, from that country, to come in and race in an extra car for whoever the team champion from last year was. So this year, Prema are the ones running a 4th car. So they have had 3 wild cards, and they've all 3 of those wild cards have had different sponsors. The only sponsor for a wild card I can remember off the top of my head was the female Quotient, who sponsored Nina Gadaman in Zandvoort.
Yeah, that was like that sort of that rose gold colored
Yeah,
car or
it was
something.
a really pretty rose gold covered car, and then they did like a little, I want to say, not like press conference, but almost like little lecture on women in motorsports and stuff at the race weekend, which was pretty cool to be fair. I
Oh,
only saw videos of it or like short
yeah,
clips.
and very appropriate for
Hmm.
the thing.
Incredibly appropriate, but also it's a very feminist brand, which is obviously really good. We don't want people that'll be like, oh yeah, we'll support a female driver, and then turn around and be like, yeah, actually, I think women shouldn't have rights. That's just not what we're looking for here.
Yeah, no,
But the
100%.
stuff that they were putting out, they posted a lot about Nina, which is really good for her because she's currently racing in British F4. I don't know where she is in the standings off the top of my head, but I think we will see her on the grid next year. I don't know if she'll just be sponsored by them permanently or she'll join a junior academy, but that is also a large part of the wildcard thing. It gives the drivers a chance to test the car and then maybe they'll come and race next year. So for the grid next year, because we're losing 9 girls at least, we might have Courtney Crone and Nina on the same team as two of the wildcards from last year because they liked the series so much that they thought, oh, we'll come back and do a full season. Maybe that'll be more interesting than whatever it is they're currently doing. Or maybe this will help me get further in everything else. I think that's pretty cool, and I kind of wish I'd do something like that in F1. They do a draw, and whichever F2 driver gets picked out gets to go and race in F1. I think that would be pretty fun.
Well, I think that kind of happened this season by accident with Ollie Behrman, and Franco
Yeah.
Colapinto. Yeah, they got lucky there. So you were speaking about is it Gadaman?
Yeah, Nina Gadaman.
Yeah, so she only drove the one race weekend. So there's 2 races per weekend that they race. And she only drove in that one, but she's sitting at 12th in the championship standings.
Yeah, she's currently ahead of Lola Lovenfoss, Leah Block, Amna Alkabasi, and Emily de Hooij.
And then obviously the 2 other wildcard drivers who also joined in. But I mean, she's done very well then for herself.
She's done insanely well because she was the first F1 Academy wildcard to score points. She nearly had a podium in a car that she'd driven for practice and qualifying. She had practice qualifying, and then she nearly had a podium in that car. That is absolutely insane to me. I would take a full season to get used to the car, at least.
Well, this is something I actually wanted to talk about because going back to Amna, my favorite person, she did very well last year. She won 2 races and had 2 other podiums. But this year, she's really struggling with the car, and she's spoken about it as well, her struggles with the car. Is there been a big change in the car from last year to this year that she's struggling so much with it?
I personally do not understand all the technicalities of like the F1 Academy
Oh,
cars and stuff.
okay.
I'm just going to put that out there now, just in case something I say is like drastically wrong. But as far as I'm aware, they haven't changed too much about it, but they have changed the tracks that they've gone to. Last year, they weren't following the F1 calendar at all. They just went to various circuits around the world and raced at them. All of them were actual circuits, though. So this year, they've had a lot more street tracks, which I'm not sure if Amna's raced on them before, but also the teams are struggling to get the correct setups. So it's not just Amna who's struggling, it seems to be all of MP Motorsport and all of Prema are struggling to get their cars to where they were last year.
Okay.
So it might just be that because they have no numbers, they have no data, they have basically nothing to work on, that they're just throwing shots in the dark, hoping something sticks, occasionally getting lucky, getting everyone's hopes up, and then struggling again. But that's all just speculation.
I know with Amna, she qualifies very badly, but then she has some very good overtakes and stuff in a race and can usually she scored points 1, 2, 3 times this year, and all those times she was sort of started outside of the points and made some passes to get into the points, so she's clearly more comfortable driving it in a race setting, but in qualifying is, I think, where she struggles more. Clearly, yeah, there is an issue there with the setup from some of the teams. They just haven't quite got to grips with that setup.
But then also drivers can set up their car for a race as opposed to qualifying. There's so many different factors that we have to take into account. And I think in general, a lot of the drivers have better race pace than they do qualifying pace, which good for them. I'd go for the race as opposed to qualifying. I think something that doesn't help is that the cars aren't the best for overtaking. This year we've had, I think it was 7 out of 8 on track victories were pole position to win. And the one exception to that rule was Chloe Chambers in race 2 at Barcelona, but she overtook Abby Pulling for the lead at turn 1. So there's basically been no battles right up at the front for like that first second. I think there's just an issue with the cars in terms of overtaking and speed and stuff. But again, I'm not a very technical person, so I assume if you struggle with the car in qualifying, then you're going to struggle in the race, because that also seems to be happening a bit with Leah Block. She seems to be doing quite well at the start of qualifying, then everyone gets their final laps and she drops down a bit, and then she just can't catch up.
It's quite odd, though, that there's no overtaking, or not no overtaking, but not as much overtaking, given that everyone's essentially driving the same car, are they not? It's not like in Formula One, where you've got a McLaren that's designed completely differently to a Sauber,
Mhm.
is designed completely differently to a Mercedes, for example. These cars are all the same. They've all got the same wing, the same suspension, the same engine,
Yeah,
correct?
so it's a spec series, everyone has the same car, but I have seen speculation as to the struggle with overtaking is potentially the different rear wing that I think I mentioned earlier. It's different to the other F4 cars, and I've seen theories that it struggles to help the cars slipstream, which obviously helps you catch the car in front. It doesn't do well with certain kinds of corners, but it looks more like the F1 wing. So I've seen speculation that, oh, they added this to make it look more like an F1 car, but actually it's making the cars worse.
Oh no. Okay, so they must definitely look into that for next season. Can they change that this season, or do they have to stick with it?
I think they'd have to stick with it now unless every single team went, no, no, get us all a different wing. So I think they'd just change it for another season. But that could be completely wrong. It might just be that the circuits aren't well suited for F1 Academy cars. But I do think it is weird, especially considering that I think it was British F4 raced in Zandvoort a couple of weeks before F1 Academy did, and they had significantly more overtakes. They had just overall a better weekend than F1 Academy did.
So, how exactly did F1 Academy come into being? Like, what was the cause or the reason behind starting this particular series? And actually, who started this series?
The F1 Academy series director is Susie Wolf. Susie used to do karting, she did a bunch of different races, racing series even, and she also did an FP1 free practice for Williams in 2014. She was the last woman to take part in a Formula One race weekend, which blows my mind because that was literally more than a decade ago.
Wow.
F1 Academy came about because W Series collapsed. W Series was obviously an all female series as well. It collapsed due to a lack of funding. But the reason why these series were established in the first place was due to a severe lack of women in motorsports up at the top level. So
Hmm.
you have a decent amount of young girls doing karting. Then they want to move up further. So they need money for that. And if they don't have money, they need sponsors. If they're struggling to get sponsors, they'll try and get sponsors, but they might not have the same access to sponsors that other male drivers, karters, competitors would have. So they struggled to move up. There was basically a bunch of people who said, you know what, this isn't right, we need to do something about this. How about we put an all female series to show their actual skills? That happened with W Series, it's now happening with F1 Academy, but it's supposed to be used as a stepping stone to help these drivers move up. I wouldn't say that F1 Academy would be the only F4 experience that a driver would have before moving up. I would say that it would probably be like F1 Academy and a Formula 4 series before they could move up, just so people can't say, oh, she only did well because she's in an all female series. But there's a lot of reasons why. Years ago, I saw an interview quite recently with Max Verstappen's mum, where she talked about how she did karting against Christian Horner and Jensen Button, and I think she even raced against Max's dad at one point. And so she was racing against all these men and she was overtaking them, she was beating them. She was doing quite well. But because she was a woman, she wasn't getting the same funding, she wasn't getting the same opportunities. They got to move up to F1. She had to stay back in karting. Then she had her kids, and people were like, no, we don't want to sponsor you. What happens if you can't race because of your kids? Her career was just completely destroyed because she was a woman. I remember seeing an interview just after that, I think, with Jensen Button saying, oh, Max's mum was fast. She was way faster than me. She could have been something. If she could have been something, why couldn't people see that? Why couldn't they give her that support?
Hmm.
But I think it's very important that we try and help get these girls through, because some of them just have like absolutely insane potential. Like there's girls in karting that I've seen the results for like the past year and a bit, and it's like, geez, that's just impressive. And then you'll see people that they're competing against being like mentioned in connection to F4 seats, and you're like, oh, but why is she not being considered? oh, well, I'm not sure why. They're just not interested in her. But she's doing better. Give her the support. Get her up there.
It's weird though, because this is one of the few kinds of sports where gender doesn't actually matter. You know, in swimming or athletics or whatever, the shape of your body and how tall you are and how strong you can get all affect at what level you can compete, which is why they separate them between the genders. It's why you have a male 100-meter sprint and a female 100-meter sprint, because the bodies are just working differently, and so they can't really, if they had to compete against each other, it would be a whitewash for the men, for example. But in motorsports, those differences don't matter. It's especially, actually, in some cases you might find women have an advantage because they have slightly smaller builds, so the weight of, say, for example, the cart is less, so they actually have an advantage there.
I think it was Max Verstappen actually brought up that point, not specifically in reference to female drivers, but he got asked about, I think it was endurance racing, and he was like, oh no, I wouldn't want to do that because I'm quite heavy. You look at some of these drivers and they weigh 60 kilos and I'm 20 kilos heavier than them. I'd actually seen it because someone who was like an Iron Dames fan that I follow on Twitter, she'd reposted it and just said, he's scared of Dorian Pan. Because obviously she's pretty small. She's pretty small. I say she's pretty small. I think she's taller than me. But yeah, we do actually have the advantage in that we tend to be lighter. There's weird advantages like that. So I think that's probably part of the reason why we see female drivers tend to go endurance, sports cars, etc., places where they can get the advantage over men, as opposed, like in terms of weight and stuff, as opposed to single seaters where, like in F1, every driver has to have the same weight. However much they weigh, they get weights added to their car, so it's like the same driver weight. A few years ago, it wasn't that, and it led to some pretty unhealthy looking drivers just because of how light and skinny they needed to be.
Yeah, I actually remember Alex Albon and Logan Sargent had a discussion about that on one of the Williams podcast episodes. And they were saying that with the old regulations, before they did this weight adjustment in the cars, Yuki Tsunoda would have been a 5-time world champion because he's so much smaller than everyone else.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was Mark Webber. I can't remember if it was someone said it about him or if he'd said it himself, and he was just like, I wasn't healthy because I was needing to lose weight. It became, and Nico Rosberg, I think it was back in 2016, was like, he stopped cycling or something because of the muscle mass in his legs, because he needed to be that little bit later to beat Lewis Hamilton. It was just like, oh, geez, this is intense.
They do some serious, hopefully not long-term, but potentially long-term damage to their bodies by trying to get to that ideal racing weight. It's scary.
Yeah. At that point, there's obviously just an element of common sense in that you don't want your driver to be dying and stuff because obviously health issues. You want your drivers to be well so they can perform at their best. But then, if every driver has to weigh the same, what is the difference between putting a female driver and a male driver in the car? Well, nothing. You've got maybe a little bit of experience, could go either way, talent could go either way again. Literally, the only differences I can think of off the top of my head are if the car doesn't have power steering, then the female drivers are at a disadvantage, but they do tend to have power steering. So there's no difference. Abby Pulling, Dorian Pan, they've won races in other series. I think it's Dorian and Hamda are the only two drivers on the F1 Academy grid to have won a race that didn't start on a reverse grid. Wherever it was they qualified, they were able to take that position and turn it into a win. There's not many drivers that could do that, because I want to say one of them started P6 or something, so there was quite a few overtakes. I could just be making things up, but it was like take some good overtakes, get the lead, keep the lead, and then cross the line and keep it clean. And it's just like, not everyone can do that. Give them the opportunity.
No, 100%.
Okay, so that is it for this episode of Keeping Track. Thank you so much, Uno, for doing this with me.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
See you soon. yeah, you're 12 and you've just won this massive championship, and I'm sitting here struggling with my exams. Give me some of your talent, please.